Hello everyone. In this session, I am going to explain about Anglo Saxon Norman conquest, and there was also Black Death, that is plague in the age of Chaucer in 1348. Anglo Saxon were the people, those who were living in Old Britain, which is also called the Great Britain. These were the tribals from different tribes. They were Rovers, Vikings, Jutes, Normans, Anglos, and Saxons. They would have regular fight in between, regular scuffle, and their history is not important in UGC NET exam or other exams. The date and the text is more important. Anglo Saxon's time was 450 to 1340, but in 1340 the age of Chaucer's also began. So the accurate study of Anglo Saxon is 450 to 1066 BC. In 1066 BC, Normans attacked England and they conquered England and introduced a new generation and a new race, that is Norman race. And after 1066 to 1340, this time is called Anglo-Norman's time. And in Anglo-Saxon, they used to speak the Old English, which is heavily inspired by Latin language. But after 1066, when Normans attacked, they introduced French language. And after 1066 to 1340, French language influence has been seen in the literature of Normans and the Anglo-Saxon. The literature was completely medieval. They were having the blind faith, believing in the god, demons, devils, fairy tales. Here we have certain epics, but we don't know who is the author or who is the writer of these epics. The most important and famous work is Beowulf. It is the classical epic of Anglo Saxon, and Beowulf is a warrior who is a mercenary hired by the kings to solve their problems. One day, a king hires him to solve his problem because a king and his people were regularly getting troubled by a demon called Grendel. Beowulf comes, he fights with Grendel and he kills him. So, the literature gives an idealistic approach in every sector of life. Then another work we have is Pearl. Pearl is a long poem collection. In it 30 to 40,000 lines in octosyllabic couplet, and there was also another long poem which is Wetset. There is one book which is registered and authenticated, which is written by Geoffrey of Monmouth. It is the history of the Britons, or other name is Historia Regum Britannica. It was written in 1147. And in Anglo-Saxon, the whole literature was written in octosyllabic and in the iambic pentameter style, but iambic pentameter, not the conventional iambic pentameter of Shakespeare, but it was the old style which was called decasyllabic couplet. In short, these were old style, and there were no language called English. There were lots of tribal languages by these people. When Normans comes and attack England and the age started Anglo-Norman, it is the famous date, that is 1066 BC, Battle of Hastings, also known as Norman conquest. After this, they kept on influencing the Anglo-Saxon literature in a Norman way. The whole literature becomes Anglo-Normans and Saxons. When Chaucer comes, he had a base of Latin and French language already, which was prevailing in the society, and he started developing his own literature on culture on the basis of very new inverted language called English. Chaucer introduced the language English. And in let's some brief about Anglo Saxon time. Anglo Saxon time is 450 to 1066 BC. Anglo Norman time is 1066 to 1340. Important book is Beowulf. Language has heavily inspired or influenced our English language. Latin and French language were used, and after that Chaucer introduced the language English. So let's discuss the important work Beowulf. It is very important. Beowulf is an Old English epic poem consisting of 3182 alliterative lines. It may be the oldest surviving long poem in Old English and is commonly cited as one of the most important work of Old English literature. A date of composition is a matter of contention among scholars. The only certain dating pertains to the manuscript, which was produced between 975 and 1025. The author was anonymous. Anglo Saxon poet referred to by scholar as the Beowulf poet. Language used is West Saxon dialect of Old English. First printed edition Thorlin 1815. Genre epic heroic poetry. Subject the battles of Beowulf, the greatest hero in youth and old age. Personages Beowulf, Haigleg, Herthogar, Welfu, Herthug, Asker, Unfrith, Grendel, Grendel's mother, Wiglaf, Heilbert. And the protagonist, Beowulf, a hero of the geese, comes to the aid of Herthogar, king of the Danes, whose great hall, Harret, is played by the monster Grendel. Beowulf kills Grendel with his bare hands and Grendel's mother with a giant sword that he found in her lair. Later in his life, Beowulf becomes king of the Eats and finds his realm terrorized by a dragon, somehow whose treasure had been stolen from his hoard in a burial mound. He attacks the dragon with the help of his servants, but they do not succeed. Beowulf decides to follow the dragon to its lair at Earness, but only his young Swedish relative, Vigulf, whose name means remnant of failure, dares to join him. Beowulf finally slays the dragon but is mortally wounded in the struggle. He is cremated and a burial mound by the sea is erected in his honor. Beowulf is considered an epic poem in that the main character is a hero who travels great distances to prove his strength at impossible odds against supernatural demons and beasts. The poem also begins in medias or simply in the middle of things, which is the characteristics of the epic of antiquity. Although the poem begins with Beowulf's arrival, Grendel's attack have been an ongoing event. An elaborate history of characters and their lineages is spoken of, as well as their interaction with each other, depths out and repeat, and deeds of valor, the warriors form a kind of brotherhood linked by loyalty to their lord. What is unique about Beowulf is that the poem actually begins and ends with a funeral. So, at the beginning of the poem, the king hero Saxon dies, and there is a hug funeral for him. At the end of the poem, when Beowulf dies, there is also a massive funeral for Beowulf. The first battle, Grendel. Beowulf begins with the story of Hrothgar, who constructed the great hall, Harrod, for himself and his warriors in it. His wife, and his warriors spend their time singing and celebrating Grendel, a troll like monster said to be descended from the biblical coin, is pained by the sounds of joy. Grendel attacks the hall and kills and devours many of Hrothgar's warriors while they sleep. Hrothgar and his people, helpless against Grendel, abandoned Harrod. Beowulf, a young warrior from Geatland, hears of Hrothgar's trouble and, with his king's permission, leaves his homeland to assist Hrothgar. Beowulf and his men spend the night in Harrod. Beowulf refuses to use any weapon because he holds himself to be the equal of Grendel. When Grendel enters the hall, Beowulf, who has been faking sleep, leaps up to clench Grendel's hand. Grendel and Beowulf battle each other violently. Beowulf's retainers draw their swords and rush to his aid, but their blades can't pierce Grendel's skin. Finally, Beowulf tears Grendel's arm from his body at the shoulder, and Grendel runs to his home in the marshes where he dies. Beowulf displays the whole of Grendel's shoulder and arm, his awesome grasp, for all to see at Harrod. This display would fill Grendel's mother anger in revenge. And after that, there is a second battle, which is with Grendel's mother. The next night, after celebrating Grendel's defeat, Hrothgar and his men sleep in Harrod. Grendel's mother, angrily that her son has been killed, sets out to get revenge. Beowulf was elsewhere. Earlier, after the award of treasure, the Geat had been given another logging. His assistants would be absent in this battle. Grendel's mother violently kills Axel, who is Hrothgar's most loyal fighter, and escapes Hrothgar. Beowulf and their men track Grendel's mother to her lair under a lake. Unfrith, a warrior who had doubted him and wishes to make amends, presents Beowulf with his sword for hunting. After stipulating a number of conditions to Hrothgar in case of his death, the taking in of his kinsmen and inheritance by Unfrith of Beowulf's estate, Beowulf jumps into the lake, at the bottom of which he finds a cavern containing Grendel's body and the remains of men that the two have killed. Grendel's mother and Beowulf engage in a fierce combat. At first, Grendel's mother appeared to prevail. Beowulf, finding that hunting can't harm his foe, puts it aside in fury. Beowulf is again saved from his opponent's attack by his armor. Beowulf takes another sword from Grendel's mother and slices her head off with it. Traveling further into Grendel's mother lair, Beowulf discovers Grendel's corpse and serves his head. The blade of Beowulf's sword touches Grendel's toxic blood and instantly dissolves, so that only the hilt remains. Beowulf swims back up to the rim of the pond, where his men wait in growing despair. Carrying the hilt of the sword and Grendel's head, he presents them to Herthogar upon his return to Harad. Herthogar gives Beowulf many gifts, including the sword, his family's heirloom. The events promote a long reflection by the king, sometimes referred to as Herthogar's sermon, in which he urges Beowulf to be wary of pride and to reward his thanks. And after that, there is also a third battle in Beowulf, that is the dragon. Beowulf returns home and eventually becomes king of his own people. One day, 50 years after Beowulf's battle with Grendel's mother, a slave steals a golden cup from the lair of a dragon at Arnesis. When the dragon sees that the cup has been stolen, it leaves its cave in a rage, burning everything in sight. Beowulf and his warrior come to fight the dragon, but Beowulf tells his men that he will fight the dragon but find himself outmatched. His men, upon seeing this and fearing for their lives, retreat into the woods. One of his men, Wiglaf, however, in great distress at Beowulf's plight, comes to his aid. The two slay the dragon, but Beowulf is mortally wounded, and after that Beowulf dies. Wiglaf remains by his side, grief stricken. When the rest of the men finally return, Wiglaf, bitter by, admonishes them, blaming their Cordic for Beowulf's death. Afterward, Beowulf is ritually burned on a great pyre in Geatland, while his people wail and mourn him, fearing that without him the Geats are defenseless against attacks from surrounding tribals. And afterward, a barrow visible from the sea is built in his memory. So that's all about the great epic poem Beowulf. After that, we will discuss Age of Chaucer in the next video. Thank you so much for listening so carefully.